G'day, welcome back. This is the next video in my series on corresponding squares. Now today is a change of pace. Rather than looking at those rather theoretical positions or studies such as Grigoriev we've done so far, today we're going to look at a real-world example of corresponding squares between top grandmasters. Now I came across this game because when I was sort of Googling and searching for all the examples of corresponding squares to go over, there's a great video by Sagar Shah on the Chessbase India channel, which covers this game and actually covers corresponding squares. It's the game between Radjabov and Nakamura, and I just wanted to do the same analysis and double check and use my sort of systematic process to sort of do the same material. Now, I highly recommend you watch Sagar Shah's video because not only do you get the corresponding squares analysis, but you also get the sort of the rather curious facial reactions of both Radjabov and Nakamura as one realizes he's lost and the other one realizes he has won. So let's go to our analysis board and see what we're talking about. You can see there I just brought up the game information. Once again, this is on Chessbase, but you can see the game is Radjabov-Nakamura. It's in a Meltwater Tour final 2021. It doesn't show the time control there. It was probably rapid or something because you can see the players were rushing a lot. And I think that emphasizes the fact that the more you practice the corresponding squares and get familiar with it, the better you will be. So let's have a look at the actual game position. Just one second. Now, I've actually brought up the position a move or two before we're in the king and pawn endgame corresponding square situation, because, you know, things are never that simple. Now, in this position, white should have played f takes e5, and then you have king takes e5. And I think the main point about that is that keeps the pawn on e3, which will help to cover, you know, these critical squares, right? So what actually happened was that Radjabov, even at this stage, played a losing move. He played king c2, and then the continuation would be winning for black. Take the pawn at that variation. There's various lines given. If the g pawn takes the f pawn, then the black's g pawn runs. Right. So let's just go the other way. Let's just go e takes f4 and see what happens in that situation. And as I said, now the black king can advance because the white pawn is no longer there covering that square, and you get, you know, critical penetration by the black king. Let's say the white king tries to hold the black king out by playing king d2, knight e4 check, and you got a choice. If you take it with the bishop, then you'll have a losing king and pawn endgame, and if you don't take it, you're going to lose the g3 pawn. So that's the continuation, which Nakamura missed a win at that point. But this is the position. Rather than taking the f pawn, Nakamura played knight c4, which transitions into a drawn king and pawn endgame, which is the corresponding square is going to start having a look at. So let's have a look at the continuation here. Bishop takes, only move. Black can take in two ways, with the pawn or with the king. They're both regarded as being equal. So what Nakamura did is took with the king, which is probably the most natural. And then the continuation, which is still drawing, is that Radjabov played this as the game continuation, f takes e5, and he forces the black king to retreat. We've now reached the critical position where you need to do your corresponding square analysis. You need to do it reasonably quickly in a chess environment, and you need to do it accurately. So what I suggest you do, if you're treating this as a study, is you pause the video and you try and map out the key squares and then the corresponding squares and then the drawing move. There's only one drawing move. Radjabov did not find it, and the game only lasted another couple of games. Okay, so if you've done that, I'm going to do my normal process here. I will just move the kings out of the way so that they're not impacting where we're drawing the squares. First step, key squares. Okay, so I think it's fairly clear that c4 is a key square. We'll just pick up the b4 pawn, win, and if white tries to defend it from a3, then the e3 pawn will drop. The other key square is over the other side, and that is the f3 square. Either e3 or g3 pawn will drop, and that's also a winning pawn endgame. So let's get rid of some of that. they're the key squares, and now we're just going to go through our process of mapping the corresponding squares. If you're on the E4 square, you're threatening to go to the key square F3, and you're also threatening to penetrate it to D3 through to C4. So the only square which covers that is going to be the E2 square. Right, next corresponding square to look at. Sorry, I'm doing this quicker than normal. This is fairly basic, but just this is what you have to sort of think about. Okay, if black is on D5, he's threatening to go to C4 key square, and he's also threatening to go to the corresponding square number 1. So we're going to have to be there, block both those moves. Right, okay. Now remember, the next step is to go to squares which are close to the other corresponding squares. So let's have a look. If the black king is on E5, he's threatening to go to both D5 and E4, right? There's only one square which does that in the white side of the camp, and that is the D2 square. Okay, that's great. So now there's two more squares we can add on both sides of the board. These squares E6 and D6, these sort of cyan corresponding squares. Both those squares are able to go to both corresponding squares numbers 2 and 3. Now, what does white have in terms of being able to match that? Good. He's got both the C3 and the C2 square to cover both of those. And you can see that's kind of matched. You know, you go back further, white has enough space, black has enough space. Right, so let's now return to the position we had on the board. Move the white king back to there and the black king back to there. I believe that was the position. And the continuation in the game was that white played king D2, which, let's see what happens there. We'll just go through that. White played king D2, but he wasn't supposed to do that because he was supposed to go to king C3. But let's just continue with the game continuation. We'll go back. And since Radjabov played king D2, Nakamura played king to E5, and now there's not much to do. King D3, king D5, and now, you know, white's on the wrong square. White will either concede the C4 square if he goes back, or the E4 square. So if we go back to where Radjabov made that mistake, what he should have done is played king to C3, and then if black oscillates, he oscillates. If black ever goes to corresponding square number 2 or corresponding number 3, Radjabov could have done exactly the same thing. So that's a very, you know, it's got a lot more pawns, right? So I couldn't use my probe run software to work out the key squares from the table base, but it was still, if we understood the principles, key squares, corresponding squares, then you would have been able to do to get the draw. Now let me sort of summarize that. Right, so I had to tweak it a bit because it's obviously black with the key squares this time around. You can see I've laid it out the same way there, and you can see how matched the corresponding squares are. E2, E4, D2, D5, D3, D5, and a pair of squares and a pair of squares. Nobody has extra squares, and you can see the state transitions. They're all matched on the white side and the black side, so that is a drawn position. But once you're off the right cycle, as it were, then you'll lose the game. So I hope that was interesting. It was quite a very interesting game, and as I said, the video by Psycho Sharis is very interesting as well. Just have a look at that if you have time. And it's also just another good example, good practice at, you know, you'll meet pawn endgames all the time in your endings and chess games, and to be able to calculate them accurately and in a sort of reasonable time frame is very important. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that video. Thank you very much for watching.